But my beats, they are hard.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the BCSN SportsWrap. I'm Bryan Fulford, and my partner right there, you see, his name is AD Drew. AD, as always, it's good to see you, my man.
What's going on, Bryan?
Hey, man, I'm too blessed to be stressed. Although I'm living in a rough quarantine life right now. You know, the barber shops have opened up, so I've already got my appointment set. It'll be a happy day next week sometime. But other than that,
So that's why you got to go. That's why you got to get you one of these. You can do this at the house, brother.
Yeah. I figure while I still have a hairline, I'm gonna continue to utilize it as best as I can.
I haven't seen a hairline in 15 years, Bryan.
Ooh, wow. All right. Well, hey, it is what it is, brother. You know, you can live through those of us with still that good hair, even though some good grays up here.
Right. Yeah. All my grades down here, my brother.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, we wanted to get back in the groove of things. It's been a pretty eventful week, not only across the country, but in sports and in particular HBCU sports. Before we get going, I want to remind you all, if you're watching our show, wherever you're watching it, please make sure to like, subscribe, thumbs up, follow. You know, obviously, if you're watching us on Facebook, make sure to like our Black College Sports Network page or our BCSN SportsWrap page. Of course, you know, make sure to share it with a friend. We greatly appreciate it. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe there. And of course, make sure to tell your people the My JBN Online is where you can find all of the shows that are now a part of the Jericho Broadcast Network. And got to give a shout out to our friends at Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab, which joined the BCSN earlier this week, right, AD?
And they had our newest partners.
Yeah, always a good show. They air weekly on Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. This past week, FAMU Athletic Director Courtney Gaucher joined the show, joined Mike and Charles and Dr. Cavill. So always a good show, and I want to encourage you to always, you know, check them out weekly on Tuesday. And then, of course, you know, all of the other shows that we do on the network, you can find all of those at, if you're on My JBN Online or visiting any of our sites with the Jericho Broadcast Networks. Of course, on Twitter and Instagram, at MyBCSN1 is where you can find the Black College Sports Network, as well as on Facebook. And so, AD, this week, been an eventful week, you know. You actually had an opportunity to talk to the new head coach for Alabama State University and talk about an interesting couple of weeks they have had.
Oh, my God.
So the Hornets' new coach. Well, you know, obviously we saw the press conference earlier in the day before you actually talked to him individually. But just, obviously we're going to air that interview, and you can always go check that out as a standalone. But just some general thoughts from your conversation with Mo Williams.
Very down-to-earth person, and not saying that you expect professional athletes to be arrogant or anything like that. Actually, in my dealings with professional athletes, every one of them are down to earth and just like you and I. It's just their profession is putting the ball in the basket, hitting the ball, throwing the ball, hitting people, whatever their profession is. But outside of that, they're down to earth people. They want the same things in life that you and I want. I think it's going to be an interesting hire for Alabama State. Bo Williams is from that area, regionally from that area, has a lot of HBCU ties, has had a lot of ties in the SWAC to Jackson State, Mississippi Valley State, with family and friends going to those schools. Played at the University of Alabama, so it's going to be good. It's going to be exciting. As a rival of Alabama State, I would love to see them put Tuskegee back on the basketball schedule. They play each other in football annually, but I would love to see them go each other in basketball. So that's just my 2 cents about it, though. But very, very interesting conversation. One side note about the conversation that Bo Williams and I had, he mentioned his first NBA coach, Coach Jerry Sloan of the Utah Jazz. And less than 24 hours after we taped that interview, Jerry Sloan passed away, 78 years old, passed away from Parkinson's disease and dementia were the things that he succumbed of. And I was going back and I looked at Jerry Sloan's record, Bryan, and I know we're a college show, but I just want to point something out to you about Jerry Sloan and the Utah Jazz. For almost a 35-year run, the Utah Jazz only had 3 coaches, Bryan.
Frank Leahy, Jerry Sloan.
Yes.
And I don't know. Would it be the coach who came after Jerry Sloan?
I'm not counting the current coach, who is Quinn Snyder.
Okay.
You would never guess who that. They've only had about 5 coaches in 40 years, Bryan.
Uh-huh.
NBA Hall of Famer.
I feel like it's somebody like either Hubie Brown or
Too young.
Too young.
Yeah.
How about Larry Brown? Too young?
Too young.
Still alive?
Well, he would have played when Larry Brown played.
So he's still alive?
Yes, he's still alive as far as I know.
Oh, I can't even guess. Those are my 2 guesses, and I crapped out on those.
Lakers. Former Laker. I'm going to give you that hint.
Former Laker.
Former Laker teammate of Jerry West.
I don't know. Elgin Baylor?
There you go.
Really?
Yes.
Are you serious?
Yes. Elgin Baylor had about a 3-year run with the Jazz pre Frank Layton. And Jerry Sloan was replaced by some guy named Ty Corbin. I don't know if you remember his career. He's a former Jazz also.
Yeah, he was a former player too, Ty Corbin. I think he was a former player with the Jazz. That's
why I said that. He's a former Jazz. And then Quinn Snyder. So very stable franchise over the years as far as their coaching goes. And I looked at Jerry Sloan's record, and I know we're totally off base with this right now, but he coached for 26 years in the NBA. First 3 years were with the Chicago Bulls. Of course, the remaining 23 were with the Utah Jazz. Of the 26 years that he coached in the NBA, he finished above 500 23 times, right?
Wow.
Talk about Hall of Fame career. 23 times above 500. Won 40 or more games in 23 of his 26 years, Bryan, as a coach.
Yeah, and it should be pointed out, it's kind of interesting the fact that the Jazz also, the whole timing of it with the fact that the Jazz were just in the last couple of episodes of The Last Dance, which is the the Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls documentary, autobiographical documentary, however you want to describe it, that we've all been talking about for the last month, that they would be the centerpiece team pretty much in these last couple of episodes.
For the last 2 episodes.
Yeah, and then you had, obviously the passing of Jerry Sloan. So, so condolences to the Sloan family, all the former players like Mo Williams, and of course, more notably guys like Karl Malone, John Stockton, and so on and so forth.
Right. And one other thing about his record, Ryan, you notice I said he won 40 games except for 3 years. Well, I think it was 4 years he didn't win 40 games. One of those years was the strike-shortened year in 98, 99.
98, 99.
I believe he won 34 that year. 1 year he was fired, and 1 year he quit. So he only had one losing season where he actually coached the team all the way through.
Wait a minute. He had 2 different seasons, one where he was fired and one where
he was fired. He was fired with the Chicago Bulls.
Oh, okay.
And then he quit. He resigned.
Yeah.
Utah Jazz before the season ended. Think about that. He only had one season where he coached the team all the way through that was under 500, that had less than 40 wins.
Yeah, that's a pretty impressive coaching record. So, yeah, you look, if anything, you're getting Mo Williams is coming, and obviously he only played there a year, so I don't know if you can learn
He played for the Jazz twice. Mo Williams did.
Under Jerry Sloan, 2 different years?
Second time, I don't know if he played under Sloan, but I know he played with the Jazz twice.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
But I was just saying, in terms of coming in as a rookie, and I believe that was his rookie year when he came in, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, I mean, I would imagine you're coming in under Jerry Sloan as a rookie. If you're paying attention, I'm sure there was a lot that you could have learned during that initial year from a guy like Jerry Sloan.
And I believe John Stockton was still around at that point in time, too.
Who were his coaching influences? Did he mention who his coaching influences were?
Who was that? Mo?
Mo Williams, yeah.
Well, he did mention Jerry Sloan was very influential on his life. Obviously, Mark Godfrey, their relationship goes back over 20 years. So those were the 2 coaching names that he mentioned in the interview that we did.
Okay. Another thing I think I got to give some props to Alabama State for their virtual press conference that they did. I think many of us have said this is sort of one of the positives I think that'll come from this COVID-19 period that we're going through, is that many universities, athletic departments, administrators, coaches, they've been forced to use and learn technology that, I'll be honest, I don't think they would have been all too eager to run and learn. But because so many of them have had to have meetings and communicate not only with players, other coaches, other administrators, the media, you've had to, I'm hoping that a lot of things that I know I have fussed about making press conferences available digitally. I know a lot of conferences have used telephone press conferences in the past. Hopefully, those will move to more digital press conferences where, because you can listen to it on audio, but if you can have that one-on-one with the coach, I think it makes everything more personable, and I think, you can, so I'm just hoping that the conferences really improve some of their digital acumen and what they're able to provide the media, which then allows us to provide to the masses, right?
Right. I mean, number one, we may have watched that press conference because they probably would have streamed it, would have been on a local TV station. But without this COVID-19, we probably would not have been a participant in the press conference. We probably would not have gone to Montgomery, Alabama for a 30-minute press conference. but it allows more access, especially for us who cover HBCU sports, because we also spread out throughout the Southeast. I'm in Georgia, you're in Florida, you got people in Texas, Atlanta, North Carolina. Some of the people who were on that press conferences were from all over. Who probably
you had some national guys too. You had some
yes.
you had some current NBA writers. I think I heard a gentleman from Sports Illustrated, another person
Yes.
from the Associated Press.
Yes.
So you had people who obviously they know Mo and are aware of Mo from his NBA days, but had that not been a digital or a virtual press conference, would they have necessarily tied into it like you said?
Yeah,
the access may not have been there. So yeah, that's the great thing that comes from that. And then of course, if you're just a fan, you want to hear what your new coach says. You want to hear from him, you want to see him. And that's the great thing, I think, for even a fan. So streaming it on YouTube was a great move. So I just want to take a second and give props to the Alabama State Hornets.
Shout out to Travis Jerome, Sports Information Director at Alabama State University.
Yeah, Mr. Jerome, as well as Athletic Director, Ms. Jennifer Williams. They did a great job with that. Props to them. It was well done. Great little presentation package at the beginning from the president as well. And just a lot of positives. And so that was pretty more schools take advantage of it. And so that, more of your interview, you can go, I know it's aired already once. It's up on our YouTube page. And you can also find it on our BCSN SportsWrap as well as our Black College Sports Network page. That's where you can find it.
Right, and
so ADV. Oh, go ahead. You got one more thing?
I was gonna say, note to all the HBCU conferences, might not be a bad idea for Football Media Day.
Well, you're gonna we may still be in situations where that may be what has to happen for Football Media Day, right?
Correct.
The Creole seasoning is a sodium-free and sugar-free blend that's versatile enough to put on anything. One of the first blends I developed more than 8 years ago, the Creole seasoning has an unmistakable aroma, a bold flavor, and a little heat for character. Every time I open one of these bottles, I hear trumpets and big band music.
It's like a loop machine. All around town, people trying to get down. It's like a loop machine.
All right, let's move forward, AD, to the other big story from the past week, or one of many big stories, but probably the biggest story that came out earlier in the week. The NCAA released the APR numbers for the 2020, for this past year, I should say, and for this past school year, but they also released the rolling APR numbers, which affect the years from the fall 2015 through the spring 2019 year. So it's over a 4-year window. And as a result of the rolling APR numbers, there were several Division I teams that faced penalties, loss of postseason eligibility as a result. In total, there were 21 teams at 13 schools that were penalized for not meeting the minimum academic standard. Now, sadly, 10 of those schools and 16 of those teams were HBCUs from the MEAC and SWAC. So the news comes out. AD, what's the first thought, disappointment? What's your first questions? Because I know there's a lot to unravel with that story that came out.
First thing I thought of was, here we go again. Because this list has, unfortunately, traditionally featured a lot of HBCUs on the list. Sometimes, a lot of times we're over half the list. Sometimes it seems like we're the only teams on the list. And what's even more disheartening about this list is when you see a couple of schools with multiple teams, multiple programs at their school on this list. Give you the benefit of the doubt. One school may fall through. One team may fall through the cracks. It can happen, but it shouldn't happen to schools that have 2 and 3 teams on this list. Especially when you only have 21 teams total.
So let's go through that. So the teams that fell onto this list, and I'm just going to speak schools and teams before we start talking about who's ineligible and things of that nature. You had Alabama A&M with 3 schools that fell on this, or 3 teams that fell on this list: men's track and field and women's soccer. You had Southern with 2 sports: men's cross country, men's track and field. Bethune-Cookman with 2 sports: men's golf, men's track and field. Prairie View A&M with football as well as women's basketball, okay? And then individually, you had Alabama State men's basketball, Coppin State women, Delaware State men's basketball, Grambling State men's track and field, Howard football, South Carolina State women's volleyball.
Do you agree to provide profile, location, and contact details to process requests?
Sorry about that.
Turn that GPS off.
Bixby wants to talk to me now. Let's see. Who did I say? Grambling State.
To provide profile, location.
Oh, wait.
I didn't understand that.
Okay. Bixby. Who else did I say? I had Grambling on men's track and field. And then I also, I think, did I mention Howard in football?
Yes, you mentioned Howard in football.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, I think I covered everybody there.
Did we get Coppin track, women's track and men's basketball?
Oh yeah, so I forgot they were multiple. That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. So okay. So when this report comes out, AD, it's basically listed out as teams that are postseason ineligible. Now, basically, as you know, every school has to meet within the academic progress report, which is the APR. They have to have a number that is at 930. So just to give everyone sort of a background on how, you know, this whole thing works. So I'm gonna read from a website, College Football News. Pete Futiak basically put this together, and this gives you an understanding of how the APR is calculated. So there's 3 bullet points here for how the APR is calculated. Each student athlete receiving athletically related financial aid earns 1 point for staying in school and 1 point for being academically eligible. Point number 2, each team's total points are divided by points possible and then multiplied by 1,000 to equal the team's academic progress rate. Third bullet, in addition to a team's current rolling 4-year APR is also used to determine accountability. So in a second, we'll talk about not only some of the schools that had individual success and not so good numbers, but what you see right here in this listing of sanctions, AD, is you have the teams whose rolling APR numbers put them in hot water into either being postseason ineligible or fell into a level 1 or a level 2 violation. You with me so far, right? I know this is a lot here. So
There's a lot of math. I understand the math. The average person doesn't understand the math. So to kind of break it
that's why I
down.
said I want to simplify it as and so maybe the best way to simplify it is just really talk about or mention the teams that are I'm trying to read just right out of from the NCAA statement, so that way it makes sense, so to speak, as best as possible. So I should note here also in this of the we mentioned there are 13 schools. There were 3 other schools, non-HBCUs, that fell into this list. You had Stephen F. Austin, you had McNeese State, and Chicago State. So those are all FCS schools that all fell into this report. And so what you end up having here, obviously we mentioned that the APR, that every member must have a 930 in order to be eligible. And that 930, in case you're wondering, like, well, what does that 930 mean? So that 930 basically, on average, means that at least 50% graduation rate for any given team. Okay, so obviously, if you have a football team of X many guys, X many eligible players over a 4-year period, 50% of that number graduated, okay, over the 4 years. That's how that should work. The academic performance program penalty structure includes the 2 levels, with penalties increasing in severity in level 2. Schools move through the penalty structure each year, progressing to the next level of severity if their multi-year APR remains below the benchmark. So among the schools that fell into the level 2, you had the 3 Alabama A&M programs we mentioned, Coppin State's women's track and field, Delaware State men's basketball, Grambling State's men's track and
Delaware
field.
State Hornets men's basketball team is the basketball team that
Thank
represents
you.
Delaware State University.
Thank you, Bixby. How do you turn Bixby off? This son, good Lord.
I don't think Bixby is the word you want to use right now.
No, I was about to say something. I'm about to call Bixby something else. Where was I? Grambling State men's track and field, Howard football, Southern men's cross country, and Southern men's track and field. All those teams fell under the level 2 penalty. Now, and this is, I'll admit, I'm being full disclosure here. I'm still, as of us doing this, still trying to understand, okay, level 1, there are teams here on level 1 that are postseason ineligible. Well, why are they postseason ineligible? And hopefully by our next podcast, or maybe the next time we get together, I'll have a better understanding.
I can shed a little light on that for you, Bryan.
Go ahead, fire away.
Some of these teams are eligible to apply for waivers based upon certain conditions, which include progress towards that 930 number and a few other conditions. You can apply for 1 waiver in a 2-year cycle. So maybe some of those teams that are on the list but don't have a postseason ban, maybe in their waiver period may have been granted a waiver because of some of the other conditions that they've met heading towards that 930 number that you need to have for APR.
Okay. Those schools that the level 1 schools, the level 1 penalties, Alabama State men's basketball, which I gotta imagine that was a big blow. Did we hear back as to, as best as I read from Athletic Director Williams, she did state, and I read this article, I think in an HBCU Game Day article, that Alabama State, were aware of the pending sanctions. I don't know. I don't recall. AD, was Mo Williams aware of the pending sanctions? Did you find that out?
It was mentioned pre-press conference, off camera before the press conference began. Alabama State did come out with a brief statement. Mo Williams was aware of the impending sanctions when he took the job, but it was kind of stated that was a off limits question during the press conference. They did send an official statement, and if you continue on, I will bring up that official statement, Brian.
Okay. Well, hey, that's good to hear. I mean, at least, he wasn't blindsided by that announcement. So, that's good to hear. So Alabama State, of course, their men's basketball program fell under this level 1 category. You also had Coppin State's men's basketball program. Or excuse me, let me go back. This is why it's a little confusing here. Alabama State men's basketball postseason ineligible. Prairie View A&M, their football program postseason ineligible for next year. Okay, and so 2 teams that I mentioned, those were the only 2 teams that didn't fall into a level 2 category that wound up on this list, this postseason ineligible. So that's where AD, that's why I have to go and do a little more research and kind of look back at the previous data and find out why was Prairie View's football program, postseason ineligible. And I'm sure a lot of that's out there. They've, all of the schools are being very transparent about these things. But I guess let's spin it forward here, and let me ask you, AD, the biggest issue that we seem to be having here is, are you a little concerned that 10 of the 13 schools are HBCU schools?
Sorry, Dad, I lost you there for a second, Brian.
No, I was saying I was worried. Let's spin it forward here, because I don't want to dwell too long on the negative. But when you see that 10 of the 13 schools are HBCU schools, I had one athletic director tell me that from a Division II program that you may have a situation where, I don't know if it's necessarily staffing, or maybe it's just, at the Division II level, coaches have to be a little more hands-on in sort of monitoring what's happening with their kids and their program.
Correct.
And, that maybe in Division I programs where you have staff, you think other people are handling those things, some of that stuff falls through the crack. I don't know that to be true, but it just seems like on the Division II level, because you have to, you are a little more invested. Share your thoughts. What are your thoughts on just this in general?
I tend to agree. Having been on the Division II level, I know one thing that happened was there was an academic tutor on those longer road trips when you were going to be gone 3, 4, 5 days, those week-long swings that you have to do on your road trips. There were tutors that came along with you to make sure that you are receiving your assignments. So your department is smaller. You usually have assistant coaches checking in on players a lot more than tutors or student assistants who may be doing this on the Division I level. So yes, you are correct. There's a lot more hands-on out of necessity, because you don't have the staff, you don't have the big departments to do it for the study halls and things of that nature.
Another thing that I did find out now, the one of the questions that came to my mind is there an APR style system in place at the Division II level? I was told that there is not. There is not currently a system that monitors on the Division II level like this APR system on the Division I, but again, talking to this athletic director that I spoke with, he felt like it's coming. And it's like, hey, look, we need to be prepared and ready, because if they're already testing this system at the Division I level, it's only a matter of time before this comes down to the Division II level.
Right.
So,
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to read the statement from Alabama State. This is from Director of Intercollegiate Athletics, Jennifer Lynn Williams, basically the athletic director. The current state of our men's basketball program as it pertains to APR has been difficult for all parties involved. The staff of ASU's Department of Intercollegiate Athletics is particularly saddened for our student athletes. Their complete student athlete experience is what we value most, and to have obstacles such as this one impede on their experience is extremely disappointing. Although the recent news of the one-year postseason ban for our basketball program comes as no surprise, we will always be affected by any news that impacts the overall well-being for any population of our student body. We have worked diligently to overcome the challenges that face the men's basketball program and the areas of compliance and academics prior to my appointment as Director of Athletics. With the hiring of new academic and compliance personnel over the last year, we have made aggressive moves to rectify the issues with APR within our program and create a new culture of education, accountability, and transparency. Although we are disappointed, we are equally excited about the new direction of our men's basketball program and look forward to building a holistic winning program for many years to come. One may ask, Bryan, is this one of the factors that led to the firing at Alabama State?
He wasn't fired. I don't think he wasn't firing.
Excuse me, the reassigning.
Right. Well, here's the thing about the APR, right? You could have 2 or 3 bad years or bad classes where maybe some guys don't graduate, and it could be any reason why guys don't graduate. Maybe who get counted into the system, they could have transferred.
Life happens.
They get, well, I mean, you're supposed to be monitoring. If these guys are enrolled and eligible, if they're eligible to play, they should be eligible to pass these classes.
Right.
The whole thing is about graduation.
Yes.
Somewhere in the process, your numbers, the numbers to getting guys to graduate could have been affected by guys who were 2 to 3 years ago in the program.
Yes.
I guess that's the disappointing part, is that guys who are playing now are being affected by what happened to guys probably 2, 3, maybe 4 years ago.
Right. One other thing to keep in mind is what they call your clock at the Division I level. When you enter a school at the Division I level, you've got 5 years to complete 4 years of eligibility. Whether you're enrolled as a full-time student or a part-time student, your clock is running. When you are at the Division II level and you drop below a full-time student, your clock stops. So you're able to maintain your eligibility longer. So the Division II schools have an advantage if they are going to get a player who they see is going to be academically ineligible. They can drop them up under part-time. They could spread their classes out to get back up to that status where they can go to full-time status and count towards any type of graduation rate, where you can't do that at the Division I level because the clock is running.
As it relates to Prairie View A&M, we mentioned them as terms of their football program falling into this category along with their women's basketball program. Now, the sad part is both Prairie View A&M football and women's basketball fell into the level 1 but the football program is the one that is postseason ineligible. And just reading the statement from Prairie View, the university's official statement is Prairie View A&M Athletics outlined corrective actions already underway to improve the student-athlete learning experience and ensure satisfactory progress in the future. A new director of athletic support services will be hired to monitor athletes' academic performance. This position will make needed changes to improve the academic performance of team members and oversee academic advising and learning support programs. Additionally, 8 academic peer tutors will be hired as support to student athletes' progress. Athletes will have access to 24-hour online tutoring while traveling through a nationally recognized tutoring company. And women's basketball will devote 4 additional hours per week to tutoring. Okay, so it's always interesting, I say, AD, to see what responses are coming out of situations like this. And I'll be honest, sometimes it's a little head scratching that some of those things weren't or aren't already in place.
I will say this, Bryan. This COVID-19 may be a blessing in disguise for some of these schools because, players have been missing classroom time because they have to travel during the semester to participate in road games. Now, with everybody putting everything online and going to a more online culture, it may be easier for these student athletes to keep up with their classes when they are traveling because of all the changes that have had to be made at every university because of COVID-19.
Before we go on a break, AD, let's kind of I just want to list out some of the top 5 and bottom 5 in the HBCU football Division I listing. Now, this is the APR multiple year scores. So this is, of course, what that, those ineligible schools were based on a 4-year run from 2015 to 2019. And of course, 3 schools were hit, namely Prairie View A&M, who actually had the low score at 910, Howard at 915, and Delaware State 921. Alabama A&M had a 924. Now, Alabama A&M is not on this list for postseason ineligibility. So it should be noted there. And of course, we said the deadline or the minimum guideline was what, 9:30, right?
Correct.
Excuse me. Just coming in over 9:30 was FAMU at 9:31. So that was the bottom 5. Okay, let me go to the top 5. We'll end it on a little positive note. Top 5. Top 5 schools in multi-year APR scores. Number 5 was Southern with a score of 952. Number 4 was Norfolk State, 956. Alcorn State was 3rd with 963. Second was North Carolina A&T with a score of 966. And number 1 was Jackson State with a score of 970. So shout out to Jackson State, who not only was the top school in terms of home attendance, but then they turn out to be the top school in Black college football in terms of multi-year APR scores. So congratulations to Jackson State and not only, I guess, hey, give credit to the student athletes, but there's also seemed to be a strong support system there.
Yes,
to help them out as well. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we can finish up. We want to give some props and shout outs to some schools that were recognized by the NCAA for their APR numbers, as well as get into a few other things. You're watching the BCSN Sports Wrap on the Black College Sports Network. We'll be back right after these words.
Majesty is a premium health and wellness tea line focused on bringing delicious yet healthy tea blends to the community. Filled with an abundance of vitamins and antioxidants, we work to blend teas with exotic spices and fruits to produce scrumptious and wholesome beverages. So check us out at mymajesties.com. That's MyMajesties.com. My Majesties, an Urban Passport member.
I have in me the ability to make you a better you. So if you work hard, focus, stay on point, you can do anything. Trust me.
We made this track to tell everybody they can follow their dreams.
Let's face it, shopping for insurance can be time-consuming. That's why when it comes to your auto, home, and life insurance needs, make things simple and trust the experts at Allstate. They will help you get the coverage that fits your needs while helping you bundle your life, home, and auto policies. Bundling saves you money, sure, but it also saves you time, so you can enjoy the things that matter most even more. Contact me, Tammy Haynes, your local agent, for a free personalized insurance quote. Allstate, are you in good hands?
For my people that don't get to see me, trying to remind you who you are, just like in Romans 3. See, we about to blow across the world just like a day that's breezy. This motivation for the people and this classic Bible teaching say, make this for my people that don't get to see me, trying to remind you who you are, just like in Romans 3. See, we about to blow across the world just like a day that's breezy. This motivation for the people and this classic Bible teaching, hey, motivation.
Welcome back to the BCSN Sports Wrap. Bryan Fulford and AD Drew here. I want to remind you to follow the show on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at MyBCSN1. You can also follow Drew on Twitter at BCSN Drew. That's where you can find him. You can find me at DRB365. And, of course, you can always find our shows on YouTube as well. MyJBN Online is where you can find all of our shows, which are part of the Jericho Broadcast Networks. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow, share, tag, do all that other good stuff that let people know, what we're doing and go on from there. All right. So talking a little bit about, just giving out some good grades end of the year. A lot of teams getting recognized, Drew, for their success off the field of play. And I wanted to mention the schools from the MEAC and the SWAC that were recognized, that received public recognition awards from the NCAA for their single year progress. Okay, so this is just for I guess it would be for just the 2018-2019 year. Is that correct?
Yes.
You double checking me here, make sure I'm not giving out false information. Let's start in the MEAC. The MEAC, there were only 5 teams that were recognized publicly by the NCAA. Pull up that list here. You have North Carolina A&T's men's cross country team, North Carolina A&T men's golf, and North Carolina A&T women's cross country. You also had North Carolina Central men's golf. And then you had the University of Maryland Eastern Shore women. Those were the 5 programs recognized from out of the MEAC. Now the SWAC. The SWAC can beat their chest out, can poke their chest out a little bit, beat the drum. They had 14 different programs that were recognized. Alabama A&M had 3 programs that were recognized: men's tennis, women's bowling, and women's tennis. Alabama State had a pair of programs, men's tennis and women's bowling. Grambling had women's cross country. Jackson State had 3 different programs: men's cross country, men's tennis, women's bowling. Mississippi Valley State had women's tennis. Prairie View A&M, men's tennis. Texas Southern, women's golf. And University of Arkansas Pine Bluff, women's cross country and women's track. You know what I find interesting about this, AD?
But it's the same schools that on one end of the list, on the other end of the list?
No, that wasn't it.
Okay, that's what I find interesting about it.
Well, here, this may be a little, think about some of the, we talked about some programs that have discontinued some sports over the past, maybe because of COVID or maybe budget crisis. I mean, we've seen it happen at Florida A&M, other schools. Most recently, you've seen it at a couple of MAC schools. But what sports are they cutting? Tennis, cross country, So look, those are the programs that are probably carrying your APR scores, but at the same time, they may be financially a burden for some schools.
My 2 cents, Brian. Most of those kids in those sports that you name do not get full scholarships. They probably barely get partial scholarships. So they're paying their own way. You know what Mama said when you left. If you don't pass, you pay. So they're paying their own way. They're gonna get their money's worth out of it versus the ones in some of these other sports where they get a little bit more financial aid. They don't have the investment.
That's an interesting study that may have to look into the percent of scholarship versus partial or non-scholarship sports in comparison to their APR numbers.
Sounds like a project.
you didn't sound too excited to want to jump into that one.
I mean, it's just something that just came to my head, but I may run some numbers because that's just my theory. I may be wrong.
All right. One other set of awards, academic awards, we want to make mention of. The CIAA released their academic awards for their individual team programs for the academic year 2019-2020. And it appears like the Dr. Freddie Vaughn's highest team academic award went to Livingstone College, who had 6 teams make the list.
Wow.
And so based on team GPA, Livingstone had CIAA. Livingstone had the highest team GPA in football, men's indoor track and field, men and women's basketball, golf, men's outdoor track and field. So, care to guess which sport had the highest GPA among those 6?
Give me those again.
Say again?
Give me those 6 sports again.
Football, indoor track and field, men and women's basketball, golf, outdoor track and field.
I'm gonna go with the clubs and golf.
There you go. 3.60 team GPA. But it was not the highest of any sport. That actually belonged to Virginia Union's women's tennis team, which had a 3.65 team GPA, which was the highest among all of the schools, all of the teams and schools.
And
per sport. I guess let me say that. Let me clarify. All sports, all teams. There you go.
Right. You know what? I'm probably interested in talk about those studies, Brian. I would be interested to see what those majors are in that golf team and that tennis team that you were talking about versus some of the other sports. Because I guarantee you that they probably do not have the easiest majors in the world and probably have some 5-year majors to top it off.
You might be onto something. All right, let's keep it moving here. More news coming out of NCAA as the NCAA came out with some new restrictions, some maximum and minimums regarding competition on the Division II level. Break that down for us.
All right. Simply put, in order to qualify for championship play, NCAA, this is just on the Division II level. Division I has its own standards, and they're expecting the Division I to release some modifications or clarifications on this within the next couple of weeks. But on the Division II level, we'll take football for instance. Previously, for football, we know you had a maximum of 11 games that you could play for football. Of those 11 games, I believe you had to have 10. You had to compete in 10 games in order to qualify for championship play. Now, with the new standards, and I'm looking at it right now, yes. With the new standards, football, you only have to play 5 games now in order to keep it as a sponsored sport. 7 of them to qualify for championship play, maximum of 10 contests. Where prior it was a minimum of 7 and you had to play 10 to qualify for a championship play. What's going to be interesting about this? My first question on this was, with football, most teams already had their schedule done. Most of our HBCUs already have 10 games. They do 10 games with the 11th game being the conference championship game, either the CIAA championship game or the SIAC championship game. So I reached out to a contact that I had at the Division II level, athletic director at the Division II level, to ask her what is the status of the championship game given this new maximum. Were teams going to have to drop a game or what? According to him, he says that the championship game is still an exempt game, meaning that your HBCUs would not have to go back and do any type of schedule adjustments to beat accordingly. So some of the other HBCUs that may be affected by this are Lincoln and Missouri and West Virginia State, whose conference usually lets them play 11 games. I know West Virginia State plays 11 games. 10 of those games are conference games. They only play 1 out of conference games. I'm not sure what Lincoln of Missouri's particular schedule is, but those are the two teams that are not in the HBCU conference that may be affected by this ruling. Also, according to that same athletic director, as you go on, especially in the what they call Olympic sports or the non-revenue sports, this is a way that these schools may be able to offer these sports. We're going to say tennis, baseball, softball, and still offer these sports without having to cut these sports altogether, because they can cut down on the number of games that they're having to travel to and that they're playing, which is a cost savings for these schools. Just to go through some of the other big ones. Basketball, minimum of 15 to qualify for championship play, and maximum of 22 contests. One thing about that, the exhibition games that you always see at the beginning of the year are still exempt from this list, but the conference challenges are no longer exempt. So the SIAC, CIAA challenge that we saw in Atlanta for the last couple of years, those games will count if that's able to occur this year. And
what was the previous? Let me ask. What was the previous number? It went from
20. It was either 26 or 27. I believe it was 26. It's bounced from 26 to 27 over the last few years. Plus, you've had those exempt games. 4 to 5 game reduction. Right. Plus, you've had those exempt games also that you could do. You had certain games that you could exempt every so many years, once every so many years. I think it's a 2 or 3 year cycle. Basically, what this does is, if you take the CIAA, you take the SIAC, those conferences can pretty much mandate a conference-only schedule and be done with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't, and this is a 1 year or 2 year?
1 year. This is a 1 year COVID reaction, cost savings, because probably for a lot of schools, it's either do this or we're going to have to cut sports. So cutting the number of games overall is going to affect the budget in a positive way, which is going to probably save some scholarships and save some sports. Some of the other.
I think what'll be interesting, what comes out of this, AD, how is postseason play determined? Because so much of it is based off of rankings and ratings.
It is, but rankings.
And a lot of times those rankings and ratings come from your non-conference, how you or maybe other people in your league did in their non-conference schedule. And if you have a reduction in your non-conference games, how are you really determining? I mean,
this year,
really, if you think about it, what metric are you going to use to determine and rank teams? Are you going to, point per possession? I mean, somebody who's a good offensive team or a good defensive team with a good win-loss record, are they necessarily better than a team in another conference?
And when you think about our HBCU conferences, I'm much more familiar with the SIAC than I am with the CIAA on the Division II level. But when I think of the SIAC is a guard conference. It's a guard conference. Some of these other non-HBCU conferences, maybe more traditional basketball. You may have a few more post-ups and things like that. SIAC, they're trying to score 80 points a game. CIAA, they're trying to score 80 points per game, jacking up a bunch of threes. What's going to happen when they play a Gulf South team? You're right, Brian. It's going to be interesting to see what that metric is going to be. Football won't be affected as much, but, we never know. There were a lot of non-conference games between Gulf South and CIAA and a few other conferences within that region where the SIAC, Gulf South, CIAA, and help me out, Brian, if you can remember the name of the fourth conference that makes up that region in football.
The SAC.
Yeah, SAC. I know there were a lot of cross-conference games early in the season, those first 3 weeks of the season. Will some of those teams that had 11 games, or Gulf South teams, or those SAC teams that had 11 games, have to drop a game? And if they drop that game, will it be that game versus the CIAA or SIAC team that they were playing? Maybe some fallout because of this, Brian.
Yeah, most definitely.
Well, let me take that back. Gulf South's gonna be all right. Remember, Florida Tech just dropped their program, so the Gulf South most of the Gulf South teams already lost their game. It's going to be the SAC that we're going to have to do the wait and see on.
Right.
The human voice has always connected audiences with experiences. Major brands all across America have trusted Kever's voice time and time again. Conversational, powerhouse, intelligent, and sincere. That's the voice you need for your creative marketing process. KeversVoice.com. Kever's Voice, Kever's Voice, KeversVoice.com. Always on, all the time.
Let's kind of keep it moving here as we getting close to, we got to wrap up here shortly. coming up on Saturday, and I all depends on when this drops. This may be dropping Friday night, could be dropping Saturday morning, but on Saturday, May 23rd, ESPN, along with the Undefeated, are having a HBCU Day. HBCU Day consists of programming that starts from 12:30 p.m., runs all the way until the last game that starts at 9 p.m., a host of games from the MEAC and the SWAC. At 12:30 p.m., they start with a SWAC Women's Volleyball Championship game between Alabama State and Prairie View A&M. At 2 p.m., they have the MEAC Women's Volleyball Championship between Morgan State and Howard. Then they get into football games basketball at 4 p.m. A really good game that happened, North Carolina A&T versus North Carolina Central. I believe this was the game that determined who would win the division. This was the last game of the regular season. That was a pretty good game. Then they get into football at 6 p.m. in the MEAC. You've got Florida A&M versus South Carolina State at South Carolina State. You know, it makes me wonder, AD, if they pick this as the one MEAC football game, are they telling us that this is their number one MEAC game of the year? Because I would argue that.
Maybe it's the number one game that they broadcast.
Well, every game from the MEAC was broadcast.
Right, but when I say broadcast, where they had their team on it, or, you know, they rebroadcast the local feed of every SWAC and MEAC team, but they did not produce every game. Maybe this is the number one game that they actually produced on ESPN. I'm just guessing.
I know obviously they had the team they had their ESPN team broadcasting the Florida Classic.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of other memorable games. Their team did broadcast.
They did the A&T FAMU game.
No, that was
that's right. That's right. That they were scheduled to. They were scheduled to do
right.
the game, but they did not.
That turned out to be the local FAMU broadcast team. You had what was it? What was the weekend where you had the A&T and Bethune that got upset, or was it A&T and South Carolina State that got beat? A&T and Bethune got beat the same weekend.
Right.
On the road, one team lost to Morgan State and another team lost to Delaware State.
Yes.
I think one of those games, local or regional, local home team announcers. So I don't know. Maybe this game was probably I would say easily probably one of the top 5 games of the year in the MEAC.
Right.
Would you agree?
I agree.
Okay. And then the last game that starts at 9 p.m. from the SWAC, Alcorn State versus Grambling. This one, this was a home game at Eddie G. Robinson Memorial Stadium. Yeah, and this one was I think this one went into overtime. Grambling won this one. I called this one. I think I predicted this win. This is right at that point where I was telling everybody to watch out for Grambling.
Right. This is when they got at the end of that run.
Yeah.
They were in the middle of that run. And one thing, Brian, if you want to go back and hear our post-game analysis of these two games before you watch the game or after the game, you could go back to our YouTube channel. The FAMU South Carolina State game was our Week 8 wrap-up show, and the Alcorn State Grambling game was our Week 12 wrap-up show. So you can go back and listen to those wrap-up shows after you rewatch the game, or you can go back and listen to the show before that to see how wrong we were or how right we were previewing those games.
Well said. Well said. All right. Let's. I think you had maybe hopefully maybe just one other point. I'm pretty much done in terms of, I know we need to get ready to wrap it up. But I know you I don't know if you wanted to mention a couple other things you had on your list, or do you want to save it for the next time?
I'll just go quickly around. One article that I did come across. This is from WMGT 41, Channel 41 in Macon, Georgia, talking about how the COVID-19 is affecting a lot of our HBCUs. They're talking about Fort Valley State in particular in this article, but a lot of the things that they talk about in this article, all you gotta do is change the name of the HBCU, and they're probably going to be affected. You know, it says the presidents and administrators are well equipped to get over the hurdle, but it's going to be difficult. You know, the big thing that they talked about was the transition to online learning was a cost that a lot of these schools were not prepared for. And not only the cost of getting to that system, but the cost of training their professors to get to that system. So, but it just talks about how the rapid response and how quickly they were to do it, and hopefully they're going to be able to get these kids back on campus. So I thought it was a well done article. Any comments on that, Bryan?
Not really. No, I mean, other than the fact that you talked about kids being back on campus, I think there have been a couple different reports from various states that a lot of states are making plans to have kids back on campus in the fall. And I put it like this: today, I am more confident than I was a month ago that campuses will be back open in the fall. Now, what that will look like, I don't know, but I think campuses will be open in the fall for students. I'm more, I just as the way I've seen things trending, I'm probably more confident a month ago.
Right. Kind of going along those same lines, you mentioned some of that, June 1, I believe football, men's and women's basketball, we're allowed to start working out. Am I correct on that, Bryan?
Yeah, the NCAA did come out with a statement that that football, basketball can begin voluntary athletic activities starting June 1. And I see that was part of the reason why I was saying I feel like a lot of concessions are already beginning to be put in place to allow for those kind of things. I think the only thing that's left at this point, AD, I think that I'm curious about is, will they allow fans in the stand? I believe games will happen. I believe students will be there. I think they're going to put systems in place that say, if somebody gets sick, this is how we're going to deal with it. We're not going to shut down anymore. We're not going to all go into panic crisis mode because we know more than we did 2-3 months ago. But I still don't know if they're going to allow 15, 20, 30,000 people in a stadium for a football game. That still remains to be seen. I'm not sure that's going to happen.
All right. And you mentioned attendance. NCAA granted a waiver of the minimum attendance requirement for the next 2 years for FBS teams. Basically, you have to maintain so much attendance in order to be eligible as an FBS team. They're going to relax that for 2 years.
What is that number? I had no idea that there was a minimum attendance number.
I want to say it's like 17,000, 15,000. It's somewhere around that number. You have your average home attendance has to be, yeah. You have to get some fans.
For FCS?
FBS.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, I know there's some okay, that doesn't affect the HBCUs. I was going to say, I know there's some some HBCUs that don't even have a 17,000 seat stadium, let alone
they don't even get 17 for homecoming.
Yeah, it's like it's like, how's that going to work? I was like,
couple other waivers that came out in sports other than football, basketball, cross country, men's swimming and diving, indoor and outdoor track, and wrestling, teams will not be required to play 50% of contests above the minimum contest against Division I opponents. So that means you can go out and schedule more Division II opponents, I guess, for travel purposes. Let's talk FCS. Would not be required to play at least 50% of football games against an FBS or FCS opponent. So FCS can start scheduling more regional Division II games now, or NAIA games, in order to still maintain NCAA status. There were some changes in scholarships.
Well, hold on a second. Hold on. Let me backtrack a second.
Yes.
That's great for the FBS school or FBS school?
FCS, either one.
Okay. That's good. Okay, but what about the Division II school? They don't get any benefits. There's no benefit for them, maybe other than a financial check, for playing an FCS school, right?
Given the way that the playoffs are determined, you are correct. And even when you think about it this year, with the and I think they did this with people would be in flux about the schedules and who they're going to be able to play to allow the maximum amount of flexibility in those schedules this year, Brian. Because some teams may not be able to play because of travel or certain restrictions in certain areas. So this allows you maybe to pick up a team locally.
All right.
Maybe things work out. Maybe a FAMU would play a Valdosta State if the schedules opened up and teams dropped on the right weekends. For instance, those are just two teams that FBS and a Division II team that are right up the road from each other. That makes regional sense.
It does. It does. That's a scary matchup. That's an interesting matchup.
Depending on the year, depends on who you put your money on.
Yeah, I mean, because I feel like there's certain Division II teams like a Valdosta State that I think in some years they could probably compete with a FAMU on certain years. You know what I'm saying?
That championship team from 2 years ago definitely could have.
Exactly.
With Curran Bell as the coach.
Agreed.
Yeah. One other one that I wanted to get out is Edward Waters hires Joseph Carter as their defensive coordinator. Coach Carter is formerly of Tuskegee University. I believe he spent 12 years. He spent 12 years at Tuskegee University, defensive coordinator and safeties coach. He took over as defensive coordinator when Coach Greg Ruffin hired Joseph Carter as the defensive coordinator. Carter took over as defensive coordinator when Coach Reginald Ruffin left Tuskegee to become head coach at Miles. Everybody see the connection?
Okay. Well said. All right. That's a good point to leave off with, AD. Want to make sure you go back and, as well as this show, make sure to check out AD's interview with head coach Mo Williams, Alabama State's new head coach, as well as we're gonna repost our top 5 moments from the past year. We've been doing a little post-production editing on that, trying to add a little video and a little visuals to that. So hopefully you'll go back and watch and enjoy that, share that. Just a reminder, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Periscope even, as well as Facebook, my BCSN1. That's where you can find, especially on Facebook, you can find us, Black College Sports Network. Make sure to also look for our BCSN SportsWrap page as well. And then, of course, on YouTube, my JBN Online. Make sure to give us a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe, hit the alert button, whatever it is, so that way you'll know when we upload shows, you'll get a notification of the next show. So we're trying to increase as many platforms as possible. Anything I left out there, AD?
Just remind everybody, hey, this is the holiday weekend. First of all, if you are traveling this weekend, be careful, be safe.
Should you be traveling this weekend?
If you're traveling this weekend, I hope you're going family to family, house to house.
All right.
You know, if you're going to the beach and to the mountains and all that kind of stuff, to the resorts, where the resorts aren't open yet, but you got to be careful. Wear your mask. Point blank. Wear your PPE.
All right. I don't even know what that is, but okay.
Personal protective equipment. Wear a face covering. So, some of us need it.
Yes, I'm right there with you. Thank you. All right. On Twitter, you can find him at BCSN Drew. You can find me at DRB365. That's where we are. Thank you for watching the BCSN SportsWrap. We'll come back next week and hopefully be able to update with a little more information regarding the whole APR. I know we're going to spend some time doing a little bit of digging into that. Have some more interviews and conversations next week. Have a safe and happy Memorial Weekend. And God bless everybody. Be safe. Thanks for watching. For AD Drew, I'm Bryan Fulford. Peace out.
I'll holla.
Industry was hurting, but I done bandaged her up. Now I got too sick with it. Now we done found us an abrupt sound. Look, I be tearing the speakers up and we shaking the whole ground. Found pros in this profession, we calling that profound. Studio in every city, I'm calling that yo town. Some of these words that I'm using make me wanna throw down, but I got humbled in my veins and learned to tone it down. Major league when I'm pitching, I'm needing the pitchers, man. Shake the room with my powers and knocking the pitches down. Trying to teach you business first and put your pitches down. Major.
But you my beat stay hard.